Hi, welcome back, everyone. Clinician's Corner. How are you doing today, Molly?
I'm good. I'm feeling a little festive. I made sure to wear a little bit of a fancier shirt because of what we're going to be talking about today. How
I
are
know.
you
I
doing?
didn't even dress up, and I do love to dress up, but I was like trying to be more serious, I think, today because I think people really struggle with the holidays. There's a lot of social pressure, there's a lot of pressure from family. If it's your first food addiction recovery holidays, that can feel super overwhelming. So I thought it was a good idea that we kind of talk about how to prepare, kind of, how do I make a plan? And then, you know, give everyone permission to say no if they don't want to go.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. And, I feel like this year has been or it could be even potentially more stressful than holidays in the past. Like you said, either it's like it could be somebody's first holiday, it may be somebody's fifth holiday or 15th. But this year, especially in the US, and I think like other
Mm.
countries are feeling it too, but with the election, that like we're more divided than ever. We've got these social media trends of people like cutting off family members because they've voted differently. And while I can understand the sentiment and I get how people get there, I think that it just adds an extra layer sometimes for people to navigate the holidays that I would love to like get into with you today as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we know stress usually leads to stress eating. And when we're so used to like managing our emotions, especially the distressing ones with food, and these events are full of food traditionally, it makes us very vulnerable and can put our recovery at risk. So
Definitely.
what would you say, like say I'm going into a family event, maybe I know there's like potentially some political divide. Like how do you work with your clients around preparing for these kind of situations?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, my favorite thing to say is we're not going to walk into any of this surprised, right? We're not going to like show up at Aunt Sally's or mom's and, oh no, like we're talking about politics or there's somebody with like their garb on or whatever. And so we're not going to walk into it and be surprised. We're going to walk into it with open eyes, with awareness. And
Mhm.
so when we can walk into something with open eyes and awareness, we can armor ourselves up a little bit. We can remind ourselves that we're going to hear things that we don't necessarily agree with, that we might be sensitive to. And maybe then we can already have a practiced, like mantra or something that we might say to ourselves whenever we hear that, or we might have a plan for exit quickly or earlier than we would have. We're going to have more protection and preparation around walking into that event, not just around the food, but around the people, is kind of where I like to start. What do you like to do?
Yeah, I think it's really important for me and the clients that I work with to already have something called a boundary script. And it may just be something like, oh, I really want to try and not talk about politics today. How are you doing? Do you have any travel plans coming this year to kind of shift attention? Because people do love to talk about themselves, let's be honest, right? And this gives the opportunity to kind of navigate those tricky situations and avoid conversations which might include conflict and maybe aren't appropriate for the day.
Yeah, I would agree. I love that idea of a boundary script. I think that's a really great specific tool. Like when we think about like armoring ourselves up or like just preparing ourselves to go in, to have that script already ready to say like, oh yeah, no, thank you. I don't want to talk about that today. But how about like how are things going in the rest of your life or whatever? Absolutely. I think
Yeah.
that's really great. I think that's really great. And then like as like the evening or the afternoon or whatever time of day it is that you're celebrating goes on, I mean, when that kind of starts to wear off, or you're maybe the person who has this boundary, and you're starting to feel fatigued, what do you tell them next? Like, how do you help people like navigate? Okay, like this gets exhausting, having to constantly like hold that boundary, and this dinner is going on forever.
Yeah, I potentially, if I knew that I was going to be walking into a situation like this, I would already have an exit strategy. So I might say with the client, How long is a reasonable amount of time for you to expose yourself to that environment? Is it 2 hours? Is it, like, really necessary for you to stay for the whole thing? Especially if it is going there's going to be food there that's probably not, maybe the most loving choices. So, is it better for you to go for maybe an hour and a half before, but then have a prior commitment? Or what does it look like to go a little bit later so that you're not exposed to all like the pre-snacks and, the food like extravaganza that can sometimes be at these things, and just sit down, like arrive about 30 minutes before dinner, stay for dinner, but then have an exit strategy as well. I think the amount of time we expose ourselves to things is what also we can tolerate a lot, but nobody should have to do that. That's just torture, right?
Yeah.
If you're trying to say you're doing it for other people, and that just makes me resentful if I'm doing
Yes.
everything for other people. So going in there, I think with a strategy, I would also say the number one thing I would say for food addiction people is going into these events, eat before you go. Have a satiating meal because that is going to put you at less risk. It's going to make you less vulnerable to some of the other foods because if we honor that physical hunger homeostatic pathway, those hedonic foods are not speaking to us. And like, I certainly been to events where people are talking to me, I'm talking to them. And, but meanwhile, I'm looking at the food. So I'm not even present. And so just being able to chat, like eat before is really going to shut down some of that noise. And maybe if I notice myself starting to do that, I'm going to really like tune into my conversation, connect with the person that I'm with, try to be a little bit more mindful and like start asking questions to engage. Maybe I also need to take a break, go to the bathroom, do like a physiological sigh, text my community in sweet sobriety and let them know, like, ooh, just kind of vent and kind of get that release about this is hard. I'm in a really challenging situation because I think it's if you feel like you're alone, that can be really challenging to navigate. But I think if, you have your community, maybe it's Vera's Facebook group, like let us cheer you on.
Definitely. Yeah. And I like what you said, like maybe find out like the itinerary for the day and then make a decision. Am I going to go and like arrive right at dinner time? Am I going to wait until dinner's over and like go for like maybe there are games that have to happen afterwards and that's what I want to do. So I'll show up then having something else, so like if you're a family or a person who has multiple events, you can always show up, only stay for a little while, say you've got to get to the next event. Meanwhile, nobody has to know that you're eating at home, not at these events.
Yeah.
Any of those things. I always like to have I like to drive or have my own vehicle so I can leave. I often say like I want to go to my sister's house to like get out of like the space because I actually travel for the holidays. And I imagine a lot of people that
Right.
are listening travel for the holidays too, which means it's going to be a little bit harder to sometimes say, oh, I'm going to show up 30 minutes beforehand or whatever. Like sometimes we're flying or traveling great distances and maybe we're staying with that family
Yeah.
member or that, you know what I mean? That group of people. And that might make it a little bit harder. So not only the travel piece of it, I think we need to talk about like how do we get through the travel piece of it, but then like what do we do when we're like living with these folks for a few days?
Saturated.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what are your suggestions that you give for like the travel aspect of things?
Yeah, and again, I would say plan. We can't go into these things just winging it when we're in recovery because that never works out well. All that does is give us opportunity to eat things that are not on plan and not like actually honor our recovery. So if I'm driving, I'm going to maybe already have a list of places where I might be able to stop to pick up some foods. Maybe I'm already packing food and bringing it with me. If I'm flying, I'm certainly going to have like the list of foods I can bring on the plane with me. Or, if I'm not somebody who wants to bring food, I'll know I can go to the airport. There's always a Subway. I can get my double chicken and like take that salad on the plane with me. Maybe I go to Starbucks, I get some egg bites. I always and like I don't buy two. I buy like six so that I have more than I need just because the stress and the lack of sleep and, all the other the other emotions that arise when we're surrounded by family. These are people we love, but these are also the people that push all our buttons. And so and we can sometimes go into the holidays with this expectation of like, amazingness. And like if we're setting ourselves up for a situation which is less than that, that can be very distressing. And then what do? We, use food to soothe. So we really have to go in, I think, to everything with a plan. Now, I will say in later recovery, that's not my truth anymore. I don't think a lot of the clients that I work with, like I still have a flexible plan, but not like I would in early day recovery, where it's like pretty much everything is planned out, but that plan makes me feel safe. I think now there's like some, loving limits or some loose structure there that makes me feel really good. But um yeah, I think there is certain things, like if I was staying with family, that I still need to do for my own recovery. So if I'm staying there, I'm still going to go outside for a walk. I'm still going to find a way to connect or touch my recovery. Maybe that's a podcast. Maybe that's reaching out to my community. I'm going to take some time for self care, and some space. I'm going to honor my need to go to bed at sometimes 7:30. People, I do. Clarissa does that. She
She does. It's true.
love I love sleep, but I also wake up at 4:30. So, there or 5. So that gives me usually that time by myself to kind of practice what I want to practice. And usually like, shutting it down a little bit early in the evening, that's usually when I'm most like emotionally volatile. And so I don't need to expose myself to maybe if everyone's, maybe having too many drinks, or that's usually when people are like maybe other family members are doing that mindless snacking. I'm just kind of like going to close it down a little early. So I'm taking care of myself. What about you? Because I know you actually do this.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say for the travel aspect of things, I'm with you. Luckily I only travel 2 hours, so there's no real stopping along the way unless somebody has like an emergency with the bathroom issue or something.
Yeah.
And 2 hours, I don't need to snack on the road. Nobody does. Like my kids haven't even snacked on the road since they were little. So for me, I think like thinking about travel, I'm with you, like know where you're going to stop. Most gas stations or corner stores you can walk into and you can get meat and cheese, hard boiled eggs, pickles. They've got salads with like dressing on the side. We've always been able to find, it takes a little bit of time, but we've always been able to find stuff in the airports, gas stations, corner stores, that kind of thing, no matter where we are in the world. It just takes a little bit of patience and willingness to be flexible with whatever it is we're doing. So sometimes we've had to like improvise where it's like, well, there's this salad with a protein on it, but it's not enough. So we'll walk into another section of the store, find pre-cooked protein and add it to the salad. Or maybe the dressing that they have in there is one we know we're not going to really want. So we find a different dressing that works for us or whatever. Like you can find a way. Most grocery stores you can walk into and they've got, baskets of fruit, like apples and pears that you can pick up and pay for individually. So there are all kinds of
Hmm.
things you can do that way in the airports as well. The other thing that I think that I would say with travel is like everybody is traveling, right? You're not the only person traveling. So expect delays, expect to run into crabby people at the airports and the train stations. And like just go in, like manage your expectations. Talk about expectations. Let's go in just expecting that we are going to run into people not having the best day of their lives. And
Hmm.
it's stressful for them because maybe they're toting like 8 little kids. I mean, we definitely saw that on our travels too, right? And my
Yes.
heart just goes out to those parents because I'm just like have so much empathy because you're stressed out, then the kids are like just being kids, and then you're worried about like what the people around you are thinking or saying or doing because of the children being children, so it can get really stressful and we can all really get ourselves worked up. So I think if we can just go into it with the expectation of like nice and easy, it's going to be busy, people are going to be grumpy, things are going to be delayed, maybe even canceled, maybe like, you get like a whole new travel day, whatever, rescheduled.
Hmm.
So just to have those expectations ahead of time so that when it happens, you're not like, oh my God. And now you're wanting to eat over it because that's what stress does to us. I also think
Yeah.
like, yeah, were you going to say something there?
No, no, no,
No,
no.
yeah.
I think
Yeah,
that's
okay, just
exactly
making sure. I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, jump in. I think too, like with because I do stay with family. So now so Thanksgiving I do. Um, if people want to see me for Thanksgiving, they can come to me. But over Christmas, I'm there for anywhere from 10 to 14 days. And again, they only live 2 hours away. But because of where I live, the travel just can be like running up and down the road and the snow and the cold, it just can be dangerous. It's just not a risk we want to take. And usually we have family coming from other parts of the country, and that's our only real chance to see them for an extended period of time. So just staying makes sense. So when I
Mm,
do that, I definitely make sure to have plans with other family members. So I have plans to get out. I try to stick to my routines as much as
mhm,
possible, right? So like whatever is working for me in my own home, let's do that wherever we're going. So I highly suggest that to people to the best of your ability. Like if you are a person who does morning meditation, morning prayer, morning yoga, or you do it in the afternoon or the evening, try to find a way to make that still happen where you are. People will understand. I disappear all the
mhm.
time and nobody's like, "Where's Molly? That's so rude." They're just like, we all need a break from each other living under the same roof from time to
Yes,
time, right? And certainly the expectation is not that my in-laws are going to stop doing their thing. Like my mother-in-law retired and now she works again. So like she just goes to work. I'm like, "Oh, where's Patty?" And they're like, "Oh, she had to work today." Like, "Okay." Like people just want to be together and want to have like that closeness that comes in relationship when you are together. It doesn't matter if we're all there all the time. Like, please go live your lives and
yes.
then come together.
Look
You
after
need that break.
yourself.
So you need that break. I mean, like you and I had breaks from what, like, we love each other. We love traveling together, but 5 weeks together, we still needed our own space from time to time. So whenever could have our own rooms, we did. Whenever,
Yep,
you could go for a walk by yourself, whatever. Like we found ways because not because we don't love each other and want to be together, but like we also need to
it's
recharge and have our
healthy.
own. Yes, it's super
Yes,
healthy. Yeah. So I would say with the travel piece of it, just manage your expectations in that, like, just know that people are not going to be like cheery and whatever 100% of the time. They're still human. And so if we can just have that expectation of like humans are just going to be human, that might help our stress level stay in check, or we can regulate it maybe a little bit quicker, just going like reminding ourselves like, oh yeah, okay, so I just need to breathe, I can take care of me,
mhm.
and go from there. But also like what about with work, because sometimes people are still working, or they don't want
Yeah.
to take time off, or it gets in the way. Like what do you say to people who are working?
Yeah, well, you need stress management routine if you work in retail, I'll tell
Yeah.
you that. Customer service, because
Yes.
people are not ho, ho,
Oh
ho fun. They are
no.
mean a lot of the time and they have very little patience. And, I've certainly been in offices and workplaces where you walk in and the front desk is covered with chocolate and like all the things. And I was at a doctor's office. So you go in the lunchroom and it's like candy bonanza. So I really, tried to find somebody within my work environment who was either trying to do some of the same goals as me. Could we also try to create like a work kind of like team event where we're like, hey, we want to be healthy over the holidays. What does that look like? Okay, well, can we keep some of the candy out of the lunchroom? It's fine if it's at the front desk, but this is where I need to eat my lunch. So kind of creating some boundaries there. And I when I was working at Mark's Work Warehouse, I would just throw it in the garbage.
Oh
I don't
no.
care.
People were like, where did it go?
I was like, I don't know, like, because it was just I was essentially saving everyone's life is the story I told myself. So that made it okay.
Of
Because it's not
course.
food, so I'm not wasting anything. Like, ugh, get it out of here. So I can enjoy my meal. But yeah, being able to take space, if that's not an option, I could go to my car and have my lunch in my car. I could meet a friend somewhere else outside, go for a walk, whatever it was. Because again, being exposed to some of those foods all day, it really weighs on you, because you're trying to say no, no, no all the time. And then you've also got the social pressures of people offering it to you all the time. Like, how do you work with clients around like what all these social pressures of people constantly saying, like, oh, you can have this?
Yeah. I mean, let's just like name it what it is, like it is hard. It is so hard this time of year because it's like, oh, this is my grandma's famous recipe for almond roca, or this is like her pumpkin pie. So like people have a lot of value, a lot of sentimental value around food. And you're right, it's everywhere. I mean, we work with like a lot of our clients work in very professional settings or like medical or healthcare settings, and surprise surprise, they're inundated with pastries and
Yeah.
candies and all of these things this time of year. Not that it doesn't happen throughout the year, but for whatever reason, it's like we, the people, feel like in order to like, we can't like give gifts to all of our team, whomever they might be, but like food is cheap, especially this
Yeah.
kind of quote unquote food is cheap. And so it doesn't take much to go buy a dozen, donuts at the donut shop and drop it off for our favorite nurses or whatever. And then that becomes problematic, like you were saying, for our clients who then work in those settings where there's just food everywhere. And I love that you said set those boundaries. I also think like when we go in with this expectation that the world should be safe for us, that sets us up for failure, because the world isn't safe for us. It is our job to safeguard ourselves against the world.
Yeah.
And I
Take
think
responsibility.
it's a really important distinction, because when we go into it thinking I'm a victim of, I'm a plastic bag blowing in the wind, and like the world is just doing its thing and I'm supposed to just cope, that can be really detrimental to not only like how we see the situation and how we show up for it, but our overall mental health, just in general. Like that can really wear a person down, right? Like,
Well, it doesn't feel empowering,
no,
right?
not at all.
Like, yeah, that victim mentality never serves us in recovery. That's
Not
for
at
sure.
all. Not at all. And so instead of going in there with the like, oh, here we go again, like really go in there with like, yeah, like this is just who I am. Who I am is this person who eats these things, who takes a lunch break in their car if they have to, who says no to all the things that are being offered, who maybe brings their own thing to the office so that I know there's something there that I can have if I am pressured. And finally, I'm like, I just need to eat something. Then it's something that like works for you. So I think for me, I love to flip these things on their head. Like I like to go in the victor, thinking I'm victorious in
Yes.
this, like I'm going to conquer this. And maybe that's why I like hiking so much, right? Where it's just like
Yes.
it beats me down, it beats me down, it beats me down, but I persevere, and then I'm like, yes, I've conquered it, and I feel like I'm the king on top of the world or the queen on top of the world, and so like I like to gamify it a little bit that way, so that
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily work for everybody, but that's certainly like a suggestion I've made to people before too, where it's like, can it just be like a game, in that like, can you like, you know,
It's a
e-
challenge.
exactly, it's a challenge. Like, can you anticipate like, oh, it's like I'm gonna go around this corner and here are gonna be nope, turn around, go the other, I like how can you just make it fun for yourself so it's not this stress of like, I have to say no, I have to say no, I have to stay clean, I have to like whatever the messaging that's going through your head is just going to add to the stress. The more we hyper focus on what we don't want to be doing, we're more likely to do it. So we want to focus on
Yeah.
what we do want. I want to be victorious. I want to go to bed tonight feeling blank. I want to wake up in the morning feeling blank. Whatever,
Yeah.
like really like think about how your future self wants to feel, or like how your future self wants to navigate those situations. Really, really think about it. Like get that image in your brain. Like think about which work coworkers are going to be the ones to like offer these things to you, or what those things offered are going to be, and how you're going to say no, or how you're going to like get out of that situation. Because then when it
Yeah.
really happens, you're more likely to do that thing.
Right. And I often role play with clients about like, what are you going to say if this one person asks you all the time? And the other thing I think that's so important when we're coming up, even if this is a boundary script around food, is creating a script that focuses on positive and how great you feel. So when we say, I don't eat sugar or I'm trying to eat healthier, people immediately get defensive. And then you'll hear things like, oh, don't deprive yourself. It's the holidays. But when you say something like, you know what, I've been eating this way and it's making me feel so amazing. I have more energy, I have less cravings. I'm so grateful I found this way of eating because I was really struggling before. then people are like so much more willing to support you. They're not going to try and derail you. And there's actually some science behind why this works. And it's, this psychology of framing, self affirmation, and social comparison. So when we do these things and we focus on the positive benefits, it frames our behavior like a positive transformation rather than restriction
Right.
or sacrifice. And then people also avoid the social comparison because people get defensive if they feel their habits are being judged or questioned. So something like, I don't eat sugar, they're hearing, you eat sugar, you're a bad person. And so we're not here to criticize, we're just here to protect our own recovery. So that when we responded and we put it in the, talking about myself and how good it is for me, they're not feeling attacked, is
Yeah.
probably the better way to put it. And really, this is just a positive statement about what has worked for me rather than saying there's a right way and a wrong way.
Yeah.
And so I think the other thing is really, it just doesn't, when we talk about the positivity, we're not triggering in ourselves that deprivation mindset, right? Of, oh, I don't, because it's not even like, or like, I can't, or,
Yeah.
that in the beginning, it's like,
Right.
I'm just not somebody who eats sugar. But I tell people now, like, oh, let me tell you about what I'm doing because I love it. And it's so exciting and it makes me feel amazing. And like most of the time, they're asking me, like, how do you do it? Like
Yeah.
that sounds really cool. Like, I can't do it. Or I'm really struggling with it. Nobody is saying, like, oh, I hear how amazing you're doing, but I'd really like to bring you down a few notches. Like,
Yeah, no, nobody's explicitly saying that at all. You're right. And I sometimes too, like, just to avoid the potential for confrontation, I just use a simple phrase and it's no thank you. Just no
yes.
thank you. When people push, then I might say, I don't eat that. Because at that point I feel like, oh, if you are willing to try to push back against my boundary of no thank you, then that means that I can go ahead and give you a little bit more of my truth. Like, I'm going to push back against you. Like, I don't have to go in with guns a-blazing. Like, I don't eat sugar and that's terrible. Like, I don't have to go in like all, like whatever they say, like, from the pulpit, like preaching on
Yeah.
like, this is how it's
Right.
going to be. I can just go in knowing my boundaries and just a simple no thank you. When people push back, then I might be like, I don't eat those things. If they push back again, the whole like, oh, a little bit's not going to hurt, it's the holidays, it's not going to, then I might be like, yeah, I don't eat sugar and here's why, because I feel great, like I might
Yeah.
then continue to expand. But I think, especially in early years, we feel a lot of pressure to tell the whole truth. And
The
even
full
though,
story.
yeah, the whole story, and like,
Yeah.
even though it is the truth and that is your whole story, not everybody deserves all of
Yeah.
you in all the ways. And so you like know what their role in your life is and whether or not they are worthy of your whole story, because that's part of
Mhm.
boundaries too, is knowing that like you literally can just say no thank you, and if they continue to push, then you can ramp it up a little bit, but certainly don't feel like you have to. it's
Yeah.
it's tough enough. It's tough enough. And so many people hate confrontation. I'm all about it, right? Like, whatever. I'm like, bring it. I love for people, like, I'm like begging people sometimes to confront me. And Molly Carmel might say, like, "Ooh, you're getting high off." I'm like, I do, because I love interaction. People fascinate me. But if that's not your
Mhm.
jam, which I totally
Nope,
get if
that's
it's
not
not,
my jam.
then then I say go in with like the kindest but firmest
Right.
boundary you can have. And sometimes that is simply no. No is a complete
Yeah.
sentence. I like to say no thank you just because it's a little bit of a, it's just a little bit sweeter, if you will, than just period
Right.
no. But yeah, we'll find our way.
And
You'll find your
I'll
way.
still yeah, I'll still compliment people and say, "Wow, that looks amazing. Like, it
Huh.
looks like you went through a lot of work preparing that, but I'm all
Yes.
set over here."
Yes.
Thank you so much for offering. Like, then you're not even saying no, but you're saying no and they don't know it.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel like that rejection they might be
Right.
getting if it's most special dish, right?
Right. Totally. Totally. So we've talked about like things that might divide us at the dinner table. We talked about like traveling and like how to navigate work. and like having these boundaries. But what we haven't talked about is like, what about those folks who are listening or even our clients who are alone on the holidays? I feel like this group of people gets overlooked often, and we need to really talk about how do we navigate when we are on our own?
Yeah, I think it can be really challenging for people, and it may be that they what I usually talk to my clients about is, can you create like a new tradition for yourself? Maybe it's cooking a meal for yourself. Maybe it's like cooking a meal for somebody in the community, something to also get you necessarily busy and out of yourself. So with our community, because Sweet Sobriety is online, I've suggested already, why don't they host virtual gatherings? This is an opportunity where they could have meetups, support, maybe even eat a holiday dinner together and kind of find themselves socializing if they're in a more like physically remote place. That it might be the time of year that you start to like think about, what would a solo adventure be? Is it just like a walk in the park? Am I going to maybe do a drive to see the holiday lights? Is it a special outing to a favorite spot? And I also love myself to volunteer at the holidays because there's so many food programs, food banks. I help out with like a Christmas toy program, and just like seeing it, how much joy it brings other people and how you're helping really makes me feel a part of that mission. And just like it makes me feel the actual holiday spirit, right? Rather than what society sells us as the holiday spirit. And so I think, also it's a bit quieter, and this, instead of being like, "Oh no, it's so quiet," it's like, how can I make this quiet time really loving? Is there a self-care practice that I've been wanting to do? Or what would that look like for me to maybe during my usual, maybe it's a busier time, like now that I have this quiet, like, is there something I've wanted to start and I haven't been able to start? And now is the time that I could start to do that. But I will say it's so hard, right? So hard. And if you're alone, it may be really wise to have a boundary around social media because, seeing what everyone else is doing is not going to help me feel good about myself. So I'm going to try and probably turn inward. And, if there is other people that I'm connected with, communities, certainly in our Facebook group, Vera's Facebook group, reach out in there, let us know what's going on so that you can see that you're not alone. And there is other people here that are in similar situations, and we want to support each other. How about
Yeah.
you? How do you like
Yeah, I
work with
would
people?
agree with all of that. I love that. Like, make plans for yourself. Maybe you're, like you said, like that's the time when you're going to go spend more time at the library, or you're going to go volunteer at one of the programs, or yeah, you're going to find your way. I think for me, it's not even necessarily like, I think about like during the day, there are a lot of these things. There are like different programs we can get involved in. There are different places we can go where we can still feel like around people. We can go to the malls or the shopping centers because everybody's shopping last minute. Like we can go people watch, we can find all kinds of things to do. I think about like in those evening hours, it gets
Mm,
dark very early. And then, things tend to like not be happening in the evening hours because that's when families are together, like doing their thing, whatever that might be. And so that's where I would say, really lean into whatever your routines are. If you are a
mm.
person who, you eat dinner and then the kitchen is closed by a certain time, and then maybe you have your tea, and you do your reading or your journaling or your meditating or your yoga or whatever it might be. I would say stick to those things because those are the things that are going to keep it any other normal day for you.
Ground you in
Yes,
recovery and not feel like
exactly.
you're missing out. Yeah, no, I love
Exactly. Exactly. But I love what you said about like staying off of social media. And then I think it's like, just treating yourself. If you are a person like, so I am a person who cannot stand like the Hallmark movies, the Hallmark channel, like, but maybe you are a person who loves those things and it
There's
brings
a
you,
new movie every day on Netflix right now. I
yeah,
have noticed,
whatever it
I
may be.
am just saving them because I apparently am a softie. I'm
Yeah,
well, I love Christmas. I totally, it's
you do.
Christmas.
You
I
do.
love Christmas. So
Right.
yeah,
yeah, you can find something, or maybe you really, like something else. Maybe it's not a Christmas movie. Maybe you're into the Die Hard series, which I still say are Christmas movies, but it's a whole fun thing to debate about. And it doesn't have to be that. It can just be whatever makes it like rooted in your normal routines. Um,
Mhm.
you were saying something too, and it reminded me of something, but now I've lost. That's okay. We'll come back to it. But yeah, I think just sticking to like finding those things that keep you busy, but you don't have to overschedule yourself just to like stay distracted either,
Mhm.
but like the things that feel right to you, maybe you even plan a special meal for yourself if you want, or don't. I'm not a big fan of like putting a lot of pressure on these very special days. That's what I was going to say. So I know this episode will air after American Thanksgiving, but American Thanksgiving is on a Thursday. And this year, because we haven't switched groups yet, our Americans will get 2 groups on Thursday. So if they need to,
Mhm.
right? So for Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, if they
Yes.
want to join, they have 2 opportunities. I liked what you were saying about like having these virtual get-togethers. In the years past, I've opened my Zoom room and I've just left it open for people to join as they want and come and go and chat with each other and share a meal or whatever. So to find those groups of people or find your connection in a way that works for you, there are options, and we don't stop running just because it's a holiday. Like we're
No,
there.
we
We're
work on
there.
all the holidays.
We do.
We
We
have
do.
group
We're
on
there.
Christmas, group on New Year's, group on, yeah. Because we know that these are the most challenging times, especially in food addiction recovery. And I think that just knowing that other people are there, or even like if the group's at 2, it helps me get through the morning because I know I've got that group. And then I feel better after the groups, and that helps me get through the evening as well. So, and community doesn't have to be 15, 30 people. It's give 1 or 2 people,
Yeah.
and that's where I think sometimes we put a lot of a pressure on ourselves. But you know what? 1 or 2 really good connections is more than 15 to 30, like, surface level
Yeah.
connections, which I don't even really enjoy that much in recovery anymore. I only
No.
want to talk about the real things.
Agreed. Agreed. I only want to talk about the real things too. Yeah. So if you are a person who is alone or individual on the holidays, during the holiday season, there are things that you can do to feel more connected. Also, like you're not alone. We're still thinking of you. We're there in spirit. We still want to check on you. And if you want to reach out, we would love to hear from you too. Like it can go both ways. That like we would love to hear from you, and that's the beautiful thing too about our WhatsApp groups is like there are people all over the world. And the thing about Christmas is it's Christmas all over the world. Now we do have some clients like in, Australia, New Zealand. So like,
Yeah.
my favorite thing over New Year's is to like ask people in those time zones, like, what does the future hold? You know,
How is 2025 already?
yeah, yeah. Speaking of, before we wrap up, I am not a fan of resolutions because I know like New Year's is part of this whole holiday sweep, right? I am not
Yeah.
a fan of resolutions, mostly because personally, it's like I set them and like within a few weeks, I've already messed up and now I feel like a failure. And here goes just another thing I can't,
Failure.
right. So I started about 5, 6 years ago, maybe longer now. I started with a theme word, coming up with a theme word for my year. Now, ask me what 2024 was, and I cannot remember. I cannot recall. So
No,
many things
I
that happened.
can't remember
I
mine right
can't.
now
I
either.
can't remember, and I just attributed
Ease.
that
Mine was
yours
ease.
was ease, yeah. And I don't remember what mine was, and I think it just goes to show like how rough 2024 was
Mm.
that I couldn't remember it. But it is something that I'm going to do. I'm going to pick a theme word for 2025 and I'm going to put it in my journal, and I am going to make sure that I do some kind of work or thought around it often in 2025, because in the years past when I've done that, it has made all the difference, because you can't fail at a theme word. You just
Right.
can't. You just can't. Even
No,
though
you
that I've
can like take it some
forgotten.
steps away. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can take it because I think I picked ease because I've always been a forceful person. So I always
Yes.
want to force things to happen, like relationships, like everything. It's like, oh, this isn't happening. I'll make it happen. So just being open and ease. And so, yeah, I wasn't certainly like focusing on that every single day. But when situations weren't going well, I was like, oh, this is because you're doing that thing
You're
where
doing
you're
the thing.
forcing everything. So,
Yeah.
that like having that like root, I totally agree. I think that that is a much more loving way to start the year.
Yeah, totally. And that's just it is like, even though I've forgotten my word, I don't feel like I failed because I know that I was focusing on other, like things happened and I was focusing on those other things in those moments to like get through, or whatever. So like I never have felt like I failed. So I'll pick a new word for 2025. Lesson learned. I need to write it down and I need to be more intentional with it, especially early days until it's like seared into that noggin of mine, where it's like, yes, this is what I'm focusing on. This is like my year long like meditation almost, right? Of like, how do I come
Yeah.
back to, if the word was ease, right? Like, how do I come back to ease, 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 ease? But I suspect 2025 will be the year of self-love for me. I suspect that will be there.
Oh.
It probably won't be that term, but we'll find something along those lines. Maybe it will be. I'm not sure. Stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we
Um,
can share in the next one episode after this because
yeah.
it'll be the I think it's the third or the first week of right after New Year's. So
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah, we'll have to talk about it then for sure. So stay tuned. We'll talk about it then.
Yes.
But before we go, because I know we need to wrap up, uh, some final thoughts is I think we need to talk about giving ourselves permission to say no, like kind of to like put a bow on this thing, Clarissa. Talk to us about that permission to say no.
Yeah, there's going to be so many things that people want me to attend or go to. And, I don't need to go to some restaurant where people are going to be having a bunch of drinks and like it's not my scene. That to me is not appealing, especially if they're meeting at 7 p.m. at night. So, what I love to say is who is that group of people? Are there people that are really special and important to me? I'm going to decline, but I may reach out to those specific individuals and say, "Hey, do you want to go for a walk or a hike instead?" And that one-to-one time is more important to me. So there is, actually saying no is saying yes to me, and that feels awesome. So I don't struggle as much with it anymore. I know at first it was hard
Yeah.
because I used to call myself a people pleaser, but I realized that that actually means I'm just a self abandoner. So
Yeah.
now that I know this, I'm like I say no all the time.
Yeah.
Or the most loving thing I've learned to say is, you know what? Thank you so much for inviting me. I am just going to check my schedule and I'll get back to you because impulsively I will say yes to so many things. But once I give myself time and I chat with Molly and I say, what do you think? At least it's like, no, this probably isn't a good idea. Then I can say, oh, I checked my schedule. I really appreciate it. Let's figure out another time we can get together. Thanks so much. Let's get together in the new year, something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say that happens a lot to me too. I think I say a no a lot, so my anxiety will definitely start to like really ramp up probably around December 20th, because we will be traveling December 21st and then we will be there through the new year. And so like my anxiety will go. So I will say no a lot just because my anxiety. So we have to like make a distinction there too, like that's okay. That's okay, but that's also not very empowering for me either. It's often just a survival move. And so that's going to have a very different energy to it. I just want to give you permission though to go ahead and honor that though too. So there's like that piece of it. But like you said,
Yeah.
Clarissa, it's like that empowering where it's like slowing down and not making that impulsive decision and really thinking about what do I need? Do I need to go
Hmm.
spend another hour, 2 hours around people, that maybe are going to be doing something that I don't want to be doing, isn't maybe what is best for me. Um, yeah, just to ask ourselves that. And I do often find myself saying, like, it would be better like late January or in the
Hmm.
new year. I find myself saying that a lot it's so interesting. So many people want to come together during the holidays. And for me, it's like the last thing I want to do. In fact, during the holidays, I'm the person that wants to isolate. Like I would prefer to be alone, but I know that I'm the exception, not the rule. So giving myself permission to even say no then can feel really empowering too, because I don't
Yeah.
want to be involved in all this. I want to see my kids like do their Christmas thing, whatever it might be. But then like I'm fine like going and I don't know, watching Love is Blind because now you've got me addicted to
Yeah.
it. Um,
Dude,
I'm
I
hooked on
can't
it.
stop.
It's like I would rather just spend the things doing the things that fill my cup,
Yeah.
because the holidays are so draining for me. I do have the seasonal effect of depression, which can be really difficult. And then you add the anxiety, it just gets extra spicy. So if you are a
Yeah.
person who has that kind of stuff going on too, please, please, please know that it's okay to say no, to have an exit plan, to leave. Just because you're slated to be there for 2 weeks doesn't mean you can't leave early. Sometimes airlines are willing to change your flight, with little to no cost, especially
Yeah.
this time of year when so many people are traveling anyway. They might be willing, if you've driven somewhere, you can leave early, and it's okay. Like, people are going to have their feelings about it, and that's okay. They can have their feelings about it. But like you said, Clarissa, the most beautiful thing about saying no to somebody else is it's not that you're necessarily saying no to them. It's that you're saying no to, or yes to you, because that
Yeah.
self-abandonment and that self-rejection can just be so detrimental to our recovery, And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm all about what is the thing that helps you to be the healthiest, best version of you. And sometimes that means bowing out. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think, people just have to do what makes sense for them, and to know that, like, we're here. So send us a message, come to the free groups, get into the WhatsApp group. Like, people are amazing. There's so much support that happens in there. And honestly, that is the best way to get through this time of year, is like leaning into those people. Like you were saying, Clarissa, that doesn't need to be 50. Maybe there's just two,
Yeah.
leaning into those relationships, and trust in them to give you some guidance or some suggestions that you can then decide, does that work for me or not? And go
Yeah.
live your best life. Honestly, guys, go live your best life, period.
I'm going to have a virtual date with you. So just, keep your calendar open because I'm going to be booking some slots so we
Oh,
can
it will
hang
be.
out.
Yes.
And I want to let everyone know that we created a holiday guide. And so we're going to be posting it in Vera's Facebook group. And so we'll send you a link to be able to access it. Or you can go to Sweet Sobriety as well and then sign up for our newsletter and you'll get access to it too. So, yeah, it's 23 pages and we set you up for freaking holiday success. Let me tell you that.
Woo-hoo, woo-hoo.
We
Yeah,
went there with the science and the strategies.
totally. And the best part about that is it's like Christmas from Sweet Sobriety, because not only when you sign
Yes.
up for that do you get that, but you get some other things that we've created along the way, and videos, some presentations. So, Merry Christmas from Sweet Sobriety. And please, please, please don't feel like you have to feel pressure to buy anything. This is all free. We
Yeah.
just want you to have these, to have access to these resources.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
All right. We will see you next
yay!
month in
Happy
2025.
holidays. Bye.
If you like what you heard today, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.